All right, everybody. It is November 8th. This is season 17, episode 2, and you are listening to Moonhawk Studios Presents. I am your host, Mac Paladin, and with me in the studio, as always, is my good friend Adam.
Hello.
Such enthusiasm. Kevin's in the house.
Yeah, somewhere over here. Hi.
Petty fans lurking in the shadows.
Indeed.
And probably most likely wearing a hat is the Gulix.
Well, depending on if this headset counts.
I don't know if anybody actually checked in the last minute or so, but I have actually made a minor but significant alteration to the show card. And I'm going to give you guys a second to look at the channel and see what I have done.
Second.
I'll give you a hint.
Yeah, you have changed it. Yep, I see. Yep, I'm outdated.
You've been promoted a slot.
Yeah, I have. And if you could at some point post that so that way I can keep that for future tweet promotion purposes.
Absolutely. Actually, I saved over the files in the Dropbox, so if you have the link to it, it should be the same. But if not, I will get you a fresh copy.
Yeah, could you put that in? Actually, put it in the private business channel.
Yep, I'll do that after the show.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much.
But for those of you who are scratching your head going, what the fuck is Mac talking about? That is, it's a significant change because since season 3 of this show, we have had my good friend Kira as a placeholder on this card because she was an honest-to-God co-host of this program for a very long time. Provided the theme song and music for both this and Fragments of Silicon, and was our music director for at least a couple of years, I would say. And so it's with sadness but necessity that I remove her name from the title card because she really has not participated in the show in several years. We were planning on having her come back as a co-host, and then circumstances required me to agree to let her step back and not be part of the show. So that way I would be able to retain her services as a artist and filmmaker in studio time otherwise. Because if we were doing stuff 3 nights a week and streaming and all that stuff, it would just be too difficult. So I want to say that there's no hardship or bad blood or anything as a result of this. This was just the inevitable result of what has actually been going on for the past, I want to say 5 years now. And that is that she really hasn't been participating in the show. So the let's just say that the era of Crane, Poole, and Schmidt has ended. I'm sure Adam and Kevin will get that reference. Or maybe you won't. I'll explain the joke. So, Crane, Poole, and Schmidt, of course, being the partners in the show Boston Legal. And Denny Crane, of course, being played by William Shatner, and Shirley Schmidt being played by Candice Bergen. And Poole was occasionally played by oh god, I can't think of the actor's name. I can see his face as if he was the dean in Necessary Roughness. Chris something? I don't remember. Anyway, a very famous actor, and I'm having an ADHD moment not being able to remember his name. But he would show up once or twice a season and rain chaos down. But the joke was that although he was a named partner on the firm for logistics purposes, that he didn't actively participate because he had a nervous breakdown in the first episode, and was basically prohibited from actually practicing law. Larry Miller. That was his name. That was the actor's name. So for entirely different reasons, Kira has been our pool. A host in name only. And so I finally decided after 17 seasons, well, actually 11 without her, basically, that we should probably, sadly, remove her name from the door. So that's what that is. And that explanation went on a lot longer than I intended it to, and probably doesn't sound as good as I intended it to, because it's with a note of sadness. But like I said, there's nothing really wrong. It just was inevitable. But here we are. So now the card accurately represents who is on the show, basically. And with that news dispensed with, Adam, why don't you go ahead and start us off with the personal news, and we'll return to our regular show format.
Nothing much this week. Kevin?
Yeah, same here. Nothing much happened.
Eddie fan.
Let's see. I had to deal with setting up my mom's new laptop over the weekend, so that was
Oh, that must have
fun.
been fun. Yeah.
Well, she has the case of old people have selective reading.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at the screen and it, telling her what to do, is like, can you do this for me? Like, I have shit to do, but all right. So yeah, that was frustrating. And we also got my niece a Nintendo Switch Lite, so she can be a gamer. Just hopefully her jackass of a father doesn't try and either take it for himself or sell it, because he probably is that kind of piece of shit.
Don't hold back.
Never liked him.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you guys remember the Digimon Digivices. I had a D3 that he just threw away because I was too old for. To replace it would be around $300.
Wow.
Yeah, no, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. Like, you're too old. It's like, did you ask me? You're too old. It's like,
yeah. And especially now that they're, hundreds of dollars to replace.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if it was only like $20.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Yeah.
Oh, and he also threw out a few $100s worth of Pokemon cards too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am not his biggest fan. And over the weekend, my sister and I are going to have an interesting adventure. There's a local scuba diving place that's having a free try scuba event thing that we're going to give it a shot.
Good luck.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something I've always wanted to try, but, obviously going scuba diving kind of difficult when you live in Missouri.
Yeah.
So instead of, shelling out the thousands to take a trip down south, we at least try it here locally, and then if we like it, we can see about taking a trip and see about getting certified and whatnot. Because with our disabilities, it's a little harder to get that stuff sorted out, so it's easier to, worst case, we have a bad afternoon with this instead of, being out thousands, so I guess I'll report back on that next week.
All right.
And then, yeah, other than that, I think that's it for me.
All right. Alex, what do you got cooking?
Thankfully, it's been a much less eventful week this week than last week. Not too much going on with home or work stuff. I guess in video game related stuff, I picked up the 2 new Tears of the Kingdom amiibos that released, so I can get those, and because of that, get the paraglider cloths for those, and because of that, I've been going back to Tears of the Kingdom a bit to finish up some stuff and maybe actually work on completing the game, and playing Splatoon to catch back up because I wasn't playing for a little bit, and also because they just announced the next Splatfest, which is different by regions, which they said they weren't doing for this game, but they wanted to have a weird widget Japanese one that would make no damn sense to any American. So internationally, it's other things, and in most of the English-speaking world, apparently, it's what's your favorite greeting? Handshake, fist bump, or hug? So that's a thing.
All right.
I think that's about all I got.
All right. Well, as I may have mentioned last week, the big news for me is I achieved 1,000 followers on TikTok, and as a result, I was able to go live. So I did a couple of lives for about a half hour apiece on Monday and Tuesday, and we played some Super Mario Brothers 3. I was working with my reality and hyper avatars. This is all tied to Up Late with Maze, by the way, which is my alternative VTubing slash podcast slash gaming slash art channel on the other side of the fence. And I'm going to be experimenting with the schedule. My roommates are moving out. They're going to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And of course, we will still have continuity with the animation projects and studio related stuff, and FPS shenanigans will resume after they've gotten settled in and gotten situated and all that stuff. But yeah, they're moseying on to be closer to Kelly's family, and that's it's going to be an interesting transition for me, of course, to once again batching it. But
So,
Hmm?
are you going to be okay by yourself?
Oh yeah, to put it mildly, they were living here under an arrangement. In other words, we were not splitting the finances 50-50.
Hmm.
It was an arrangement where we did some bartering on services and stuff like that for the studio and whatnot, for which Kira has contributed quite a bit of labor.
Hmm.
But as far as actual cash outlay, I was doing probably more than 75%.
Hmm.
Because outside of whatever side income I have off of the channel and stuff, I of course am a gig economy employee. After 25 years in retail, I took my retirement in 2019 and went to being a entertainer and driver and delivery person full time, because and I am by no means bragging about this, but I have had a 11% or better increase in pay steadily for the last 4 years in terms of overall earnings between art creation and my gig work. I'm probably on pace to do 45 grand this year.
Huh.
Now, to give you an idea, not that I'm trying to put my business out on the street here, because my generation and my parents' generation don't do that kind of thing. But if you put it in perspective, even as a retail manager, I don't believe that I ever made more than $28,000 a year. Definitely not on Tucson money. Everybody loves to both brag and whine about how this area is economically depressed and therefore they can basically squeeze people for lower wages and have it go farther. It's one of those backhanded selling points of the area. And so I've been on a pretty steady increase for quite some time. And while I am working more, I'm still not working over the number of hours per week that I did. I've simply shifted my focus. I now do like 10-hour shifts Saturdays and Sundays, and make more money than I ever did working 40 plus hours a week at my regular job. I think the biggest year that I had prior to starting in the gig economy was 2014, when I was working 67 hours a week at 2 jobs. I think I made 44 grand that year. But you see what I had to put into it in order to, I mean, I literally slept 6 hours a night and had 0 days off. Except for like federal holidays. And one of my jobs actually worked several of those federal holidays and paid me double time. So it was an interesting year. But like I said, this year I took a look at the numbers and I was like, well, shit, Jesus. Having no roommates, my electric bill will go down significantly.
Especially when one of those is a big gaming streamer rig person.
Well, I mean, I have like 5 computers running for my rig too, you know, so it's not like
Okay, so yeah, it'll only go down like 1/5 instead of like 1/2. But
well, I've started turning my extra computers off. I used to leave them idling because that's what people in the computer industry did. You know, we want to make sure that our hardware lasts as long as possible, and unfortunately, in modern times, even the best so-called best hardware is you know, the best you can get from the lowest possible bidder.
Are these like render rigs you would use?
Well, no, maybe it's an ADHD thing, or maybe it's the fact that I spent 20 years in the business as a computer technician. But I have...
half of them are pretty much just for emulating 1 or 2 specific things.
I have 2 of them for sure set up for that. I have an art machine. I have an old gaming rig that I have been Frankensteining since 2014. I have this box that I found out by the dumpster that I put new parts into that is running City of Heroes, and then I have a Adobe After Effects machine, Adobe After Effects, Adobe Animate machine sitting behind me that's a Ryzen 5, and then I have a Ryzen 7 gaming machine that was gifted to me by one of my development partners for my webcomics. And you know, I have 2 art machines. I have the machine that I'm streaming off of right now, which is I'm going to upgrade that to a Ryzen 9. It's currently a Ryzen 3. It's a Ryzen 3 2200G running on a 470 Max motherboard. And for those of you in the technological know, that's a pretty stupid processor to be running on a board that nice. Especially since AMD went to unified code and you can put literally any processor 2000, 3000, or 5000 series onto this board now if you have the right BIOS update.
You turn into a robot for about half of that line.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, though. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's just technology. So it's like, and then I have two retro gaming machines. Both of them are beige Dells from the late 90s.
That's a requirement these days.
Yep. Well, one of them's running a Rage XL graphics card, and the other one's running a Voodoo 3000 AGP graphics card. So.
Man, you playing Tribes 2 on that bad boy?
Tribes 2, Wing Commander 4 DVD edition because of my Cinemaster decoder card. I got one of those. What is it? The Sigma Hollywood Magic cards that was the basis of the DXR3 decoder card. I could geek out.
Oh man, you playing playing some Wing Commander Prophecy on that?
Oh yeah. Well, that's on the agenda, but I did promise my fans at some point within a 5-year stretch, I was going to get this machine operational and hooked up to my VGA capture unit, so that way I could. I could play Wing Commander 4 DVD edition on original hardware. And I have the 9-pin analog Wingman Extreme joystick sitting behind me that I found at Desert Industries thrift stores for $10. This fucker sells on eBay for $75 because I guess it's no longer common. But apparently analog joysticks that plug into the game port on a sound card are very difficult to come by. I honestly wish I still had my Saytech Commander USB that I got from my old boss back in San Diego 20 years ago. I wish I hadn't sold it back to him. I wish I still had that damn thing because that one had like the flip up top. And I'm like, it's like Fox 2, playing Jet Fighter 2. Yeah.
Remember, so Microsoft Force Feedback, when that one came out with all of its nifty servos and stuff, I thought that one was like the pinnacle of where joystick technology could go.
Oh, I have one of those. I have the one that has the big fat unit with the throttle on it, so that way and it has the figure 8 power cord.
Oh man, playing a freaking F-22 Lightning on that bad boy.
Yeah, I was a big Wing Commander guy. I had all the Wing Commander games and all of their variants. I even rigged up a Macintosh so I could play Super Wing Commander.
You didn't just buy a 3DO?
Well, I have
the $1 million that cost.
I had that too. I got mine for like $150 when I was working at Software, etc.
Oh, okay.
I have the Gold Star unit.
Yeah, I got a couple gold stars, and then I got some Panasonic ones as well.
So yeah, a lot of things will be happening here, but I have a lot of technology around me. Just because I retired 4 years ago from the computer industry doesn't mean that I'm not still, here with 15 monitors, pretending I'm Robert Downey Jr. in a Scanner Darkly. I make that reference a lot, and people are like, "Well, I don't know. It's a 2005 movie where they hired live actors and then turned it into quasi animation with mocap
and painted over it
with mocap technology." For some, it's a Philip K. Dick novel, A Scanner Darkly, great, underrated classic. Largely because nobody saw it. I mean, it's like, yeah, it was just like that time Gary Sinise did that thing in that movie Imposter, huh? Yeah.
I feel like there was a brief period of time where a lot of things were not properly released in like 2003 to 2007. They just did not get like the right theatrical runs. Scanner Darkly, Imposter. I'm trying to think of a couple other films that were just pushed straight to just DVD.
I think wasn't the movie Reindeer Games even loosely based on a Philip K. Dick novel?
Oh God, I couldn't tell you that.
Something weird like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I guess I should stop beating around the bush and introduce our guest for tonight. Tonight we have Ian Thorpe of Historic Nerd. That's the voice you've been hearing me banter with for the last few minutes.
Yeah. Hello there. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I could talk about underrated Philip K. Dick based movies all night, but let's get the introduction correct here. Tell us a little bit about your show and what you do.
So for me, I'm I guess you could say YouTuber, but I've been doing the Historic Nerd, I guess, content for probably the last bit over a decade now. Originally started back on Blip.tv when that was a thing.
Wow.
Been doing gaming, historical information content for about 10 years now. Still doing it on YouTube. Have a website. Don't update it that often because no one goes to it. But yeah, I guess that's the simplest explanation of what I do is just retro video game history content, as well as occasional film and other multimedia content reviews.
Awesome. Yeah, it was like I was saying, it's like I'm surrounded by all this technology because I've been collecting consoles and things since 1980. Yeah, so it's like I have variants of Atari 2600, and I just for $6 at a thrift store I just picked up a Atari flashback.
I too am a hoarder, and I appreciate these things. I have an entire room in my house that's been floor to ceiling, like a walk-in closet that is literally floor to ceiling retro video games that I have all those things in that I've been collecting since probably. I didn't really get into retro gaming till probably 2007, at least when the Angry Video Game Nerd kind of scratched an itch, and I'm like, God, I miss these things.
Right.
And started collecting, going to thrift stores heavily. And so I've built a collection over the last 10 years that's an entire walk-in closet. So there's that.
It's funny that you bring up the Angry Video Game Nerd because he inspired me for some inexplicable reason to buy an Atari Jaguar and all of the relevant games necessary to say that I have a Jaguar library.
I have 2 Jaguars, and I don't know why.
Hey, listen. The few great Amiga ports that they made for that console made it worth it in my mind.
I will put this out there. The work done on Atari Jaguar Doom literally laid the ground foundation for like at least a third of the ports out there in terms of the source code supporting that production of those. Like the 32X version has source code elements in it. The 3DO version has source code elements in it. It's just the Jaguar somehow has its fingers intertangled with a lot of things in gaming history in some way or another, and it's kind of fascinating in that regard.
Mm-hmm. What's even more amazing about that, you want to talk about technology nerding out here, is the fact that the reason that they had so many Amiga ports was because when they got the dev kit, when the third parties got the dev kits for the Atari Jaguar, they had absolutely no idea how to use the 32-bit RISC processor or the graphical blitters that Commodore was so famous for. Commodore and Amiga were so famous for, and they integrated all of that technology, like from Amiga and Atari ST computers and all that. They integrated all that technology into the Jaguar, plus a bunch of custom stuff, and nobody used any of the custom stuff because they had no clue how to program for it. So what they did was they took the Motorola 68000 series sound processor that was in the machine, and they said, fuck, we can do Amiga ports. And that's like Zool 2 and...
Yeah, like you get Zool 2, one of the weirdest European platformers you could ever play on the Jaguar.
And it's a lot of fun, but, Bubsy and Sonic, it ain't.
Yeah, they're not gonna, the killer app that's gonna sell your system, right? But man, but I could talk for days about Atari under Frank Trammell or Jack Trammell and all that, and just the toxic environment that was there, and what they accomplished through that. It's been fascinating stuff. Like I was doing a research project trying to dig into when Atari was offered the rights to sell the Genesis in North America, there was a lot of stuff that occurred to where like they literally had the deal. Sega was going to do it. Atari could have had it. And the Tramiels were the main reason that deal completely disintegrated. And I had talked to Katz, and then I'd also talked to Steve Lawrence, who were VPs at Atari at the time before jumping ship at a later date. And like they had nothing nice to say about the Tramiels in terms of how they ran the business. So it's always fascinating to see how like the Atari had a lot of potential under the Tramiels, but ultimately the Tramiels were the main factor that just crippled the company's capabilities. Because it was literally like Jack Tramiel bought Atari as a revenge fantasy against Commodore to destroy their computer empire. So it's always a fascinating story. And in terms of how,
Right.
oh man, it's amazing. I don't know how much you know about Jack Tramiel and all that, but that was always a really intriguing thing. Like Atari and the Jaguar, the Panther, and the Tramiels, they're so intertwined with Jack, and that's just toxicity is the only way I can describe it.
You have clearly not listened to enough Fragments of Silicon, because
oh, probably not.
Adam could probably go on for days about this. I'm sure Kevin has a couple of things to say.
Not a lot, but
maybe
passing
maybe one or two things based on some of our entertainment segments where we've talked about technology.
Yeah.
I don't think he's.
I'm not deep into it, no, but
the Tramiels.
Yeah, I don't think I'm deep into it now.
The thing I've never come across is. The thing I've never come across is anyone who likes the Tramiels. I'm sure they theoretically exist.
I'm pretty sure that some people got black bagged over the Tramiels. If you know what I'm saying.
One of my favorite conversations I've had, there's a follower of my channel named Gorilla Jones who worked for a couple of gaming magazines back in the early 90s. And he had a couple of like direct face-to-face interviews with Tramiels. And they rolled up in Ferraris, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the lawsuit we just settled with Sega bought me this Ferrari." Shit like that. Fantastic.
Oh, not too many people know about that lawsuit. Just over of all games, Game Ground.
And then of course we can't forget the Atari Trade West lawsuit over Double Dragon. Have you ever seen the Atari? You ever seen the Atari version of Double Dragon for the Atari 2600?
I have.
It's awful. I owned it.
Did Jack Tramiel come into your house and punch you and take it from you? The lawsuit was over.
Oh my God! Imagine trying to defeat bad guys using a joystick and one button for all actions.
I mean, you have to use your imagination mostly with the 2600. That's the way you go, right?
Yeah, and this is what they sued over, was the fact that they actually released this cartridge. I found it at Sam Goody's for $2 back in 1996.
You paid
it was still there?
Yeah. Yeah, I paid too much for it.
That's great.
I would have actually paid $5 for a rogue copy of E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Over this.
I remember walking into a pawn shop back in like, I think it was 2008, and this guy like, I'm like, hey, oh cool, ET. He's like, yeah, I want $20 for it. I'm like, I'm not giving you $20 for ET.
Well,
I think it was like we settled on $5.
I mean, somebody literally handed me a bag of Atari 2600 games with a console that I bought at Bookman's, and there was like 2 copies of ET just shoved in there, and I was like, no thanks.
Yeah, here's the thing about ET.
Put that on
they
me.
made millions of these.
Like, oh yeah.
They very famously oversold inventory on this particular title. That's the thing that really hurt Atari.
The only reason that the AVGN Indiana Jonesing those copies in the New Mexico desert was so significant was because of the fact that the circumstances of them burying 250,000 copies of this game in the desert was so bizarre.
Yeah,
They massively overproduced it, and it was very disappointing to a lot of people. So a lot of the copies, even that did get sold, got returned, which is arguably worse than just not selling in the first place.
There was some additional fuckery going on there, but I forget the details right now.
Mm.
Yeah, the 82 crash is a pretty fascinating point in just gaming history in general. But yeah, you could talk about all kinds of stuff. 83, thank you. What's just fascinating about that whole thing is what was it? Like with the ET cartridges, they're like, it's more expensive to store these in our warehouses than it would be to just bury it in the desert.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like oh boy.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, it's been postulated that the crash kicked off a whole lot of things, but anyway.
We're gonna shift gears a little bit here, and I'm gonna let Adam handle the more structured part of this interview. But I did enjoy our little banter there for a moment. So
Sorry, let me take it off the rails.
Yeah, exactly. So Adam, let's steer back to the more structured questions here and get that going.
All right. So what got you, how do I put this? Not so much interested, but motivated to, make a YouTube channel out of, video game history?
So my background, my college degree is in history. So I have a background in research and archival work like that. And that was before I joined the military later. But essentially, I was doing that, and I went to PAX in like 2010. This is going to be kind of a weird story for you. But I was standing in line to go into a little exhibit to check out. I think it was like Rage or something like that. And all these people with press passes got to cut me. And I was like, what makes them so special? They have press badges. So I'm like, you know what? I bet I can make media content and get to the head of the line like them as well. but no, that's one of the gags in terms of my selfish nature in that. But ultimately, my degree's in history, and I had a fascination with video games. And something that I thought was pretty fascinating about video games in general is that video games is a living history. A lot of the people that started the industry are still alive today, because ultimately it's 40 to 50 years old. And it's living history that isn't being documented very successfully, as in information is being lost constantly. And so that was one of my motivating factors in the fact that I've done research and interviews with some people that are, I guess, industry staples, and just collecting and gathering that information and just saving it. Because as a historian, quote-unquote historian, saving that information and just leaving it for future generations is always just a fun thing.
Yeah.
I can relate since, my history, I went to college for history as well.
All right.
And my show has had various industry veterans and archivists and preservers on the program. Like we just had some people from Digital Eclipse there. We talked about the Golden Asta series, for example, if you're familiar with that.
Not terribly familiar.
It's basically their history preservation label, documenting the history of, well, in this case, are you familiar with the game Karateka?
I'm not actually.
Everybody used to mispronounce this as karateka, or it's a side-scrolling karate game where you were dressed in a karate gi, wearing a black belt.
Yeah, generic karate man.
I remember this. Okay, that was
karate man, and then you had
Apple computer.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Apple II, among other platforms.
But that was the most famous one.
Well, it's the original one. But not the only one. Not the only one that Jordan Nerd worked on. It was
released on the Atari ST as well. So.
Yes, it was, but it was also before that released on the Atari 8-bit Loco. I had to do quite a bit of research on this. So, and we just did an interview about this.
It was Street Fighter before there was Street Fighter, and it had some rather interesting game mechanics. I actually beat it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like,
When you
I
have to
can
fight,
only
when you
get
have to
to
fight the Shogun at the end, and you have to, and he throws his eagle at you, that threw me for a loop.
I
Yeah.
have faint memories in the late '80s in school where the Apple II was in the corner where they had diskettes. I think it was next to like the Challenger Math Adventure. I think we had it.
Jesus.
Oh, that's awakening some memories right there. I think I put that as well. Like,
Oh,
but
yeah,
yeah,
I played a ton of Challenger Math Adventure. That one ruled.
but yeah, they're also the people who made the Atari 50 collection. If you're familiar with that,
No, I'm not.
Teenage Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection.
Okay.
Like I said, lot of these retro packs, and other people like this, like Night Dive Studios, and it's been interesting to talk video game history with those who are seeking to preserve it and those who have lived it. And
I'm
it's
gonna steer you back real quick, Adam, because it sounded like you were gonna you were asking about Karateka for a very specific reason, though.
I was not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. Like,
Okay, I
but
just wanted
no,
to
I'm
make sure
getting
we
to-
didn't. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that.
No. I'm getting to the main thrust here. And that
Okay.
is, the state of video game preservation as it is now. Where do you think that lies?
Do you mean in terms of like the like modern industry doing it, or do you mean like in terms of like the going back like a decade and preserving a lot of that?
Both, actually.
Okay. It's pretty fascinating in terms of some of the stuff I've done. At least when you're dealing with like the major corporations like Nintendo and Philips and things like that. I've tried incredibly hard to dig information from Philips and Nintendo about the failed CD attachment deal that they tried to do, and which ended up, of course, the CDI having Nintendo titles. And it's kind of fascinating because you have certain aspects of video game history that I fundamentally believe are somewhat lost to time, just because corporations don't have that same incentive to save history like government entities would or the individual citizen. So I would say there are aspects of it that are lost, but I think due to valiant work of people in the community now, like yourself, and especially, I don't know if you know of a history of how we play, Ethan. People have been doing you check him out. Phenomenal gaming historian. He actually pretty much writes for the Gaming Historian now. But the work, the work he does is phenomenal in terms of the contacts he's made and the nuances he's done into saving some and preserving some of that older history. And unfortunately, we're kind of like in that silent film era of video games where a lot of stuff was made, but a lot of records and copies weren't kept, just because people were like making things, and there's more data and information being produced now than ever in the entirety of human history. So things inevitably will be lost just because of that excess of information and content. But I think we're doing better now in saving that for sure.
I think I would tend to agree with that. Now, like in regards to, say, anything Nintendo, from what I've been able to glean and understand, Nintendo actually like preserves everything that they do. It's just they don't let anyone see it.
Oh, yeah, they won't talk about it.
Yeah, unless they want to talk about it. Like I'm remembering some of the Iwata asks, like when they brought up the original Legend of Zelda, they brought out some of the original design documents, and scan that in for that. Just stuff that you would that like a lot of other companies just would not keep. They had. It's just it's more under lock and key.
Oh yeah. With Nintendo, I found it was pretty fascinating. I did a whole thing like trying to contact them, PR people, public affairs folks, just about every angle I could try to talk to Nintendo. I even went about trying to get a hold of Howard Lincoln to see if he knew anything about that particular contact deal, at least on the Philips Nintendo CD attachment. And it was fascinating because Nintendo would do this funny roundabout thing where they would redirect me to like a public affairs firm who would then tell me they don't handle that, even though Nintendo directed me that way. So it's really funny how Nintendo deflects because they really don't want to talk about those things. Philips, it was funny with Philips because I reached into like Philips. I was talking to several people within that corporation who they're like, no, we don't know anything about that. And then my favorite thing was finding other people who were embezzling from Philips who got arrested, and they won't answer calls because, they think I'm a lawyer. And then other people who worked with them saying, I never want to speak to that human again. So just all kinds of amazing things in that aspect of just trying to get information about this very trivial thing in human history, but it's a fascinating point in gaming history anyway. So trying to get more information about that, and to the point of like I've had Dutch followers of my channel reach out, and they've also talked to Philips, and like Philips is like, as we told Mr. Thorpe, we are not discussing this. And so they reach the same people. So it's great. And
Sir, Mr. Thorpe's calling on line 2 again. Oh, God damn it, not again.
But
I'm guessing
yeah.
that if it sounds like things went really, really south. Just on all sides.
With the Philips Nintendo deal,
yeah.
It's kind of fascinating because I think my personal theory about that whole deal was, so a hardware spec was produced. They knew exactly what the specs would be, because ultimately the arrangement between Nintendo and Philips was that any game that was licensed by Nintendo for the Philips CDI could play on the CD attachment with the SNES. So those games had specs within reason for working on that platform. But what I find fascinating is that I don't believe Nintendo or Philips had ever had any intention of actually releasing the CD attachment.
No.
Because ultimately it was kind of just a deal to slap Sony in the face to try and stop them from entering the market. Because Philips was ultimately pissed because Sony was moving away from the CDI format that they had co-developed with Sony. And so Sony was like, yeah, we're not interested in following up on that. And Philips was like, the hell you are.
What? Sony backing away from technology that they co-authored? I've never heard of that.
No, never. They wouldn't do that. No.
Mini disc.
But this is one of those weird passionate points in history where like I've followed it quite a bit. I found one of the developers who actually like managed the teams that developed Hotel Mario and the Zelda games and all that. And then just the weird stories of them outsourcing production to like St. Petersburg production studios, and you're like, what?
Yep. I'm like, well, if nothing else, those games left an impact. Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Like, in fact, there's a game coming out next year that's inspired by those particular titles.
Mm-hmm. One of my good buddies, I don't know if you're familiar with Wrestles with Gaming. I think he's voicing. He's a voice actor on some of those.
Oh my god.
Oh boy.
It's like I've seen long plays of like Wand of Gamelon, Legend of Zelda Wand of Gamelon and stuff like that, and it's just, we criticize the animated series for, excuse me, princess, but this is like a whole other level.
There's a reason why the CDI Zelda games and Hotel Mario were a staple of early YouTube poops. Like,
so I would argue that the Zelda games are among the worst games ever created, but I would argue that Hotel Mario is actually a solid puzzle platformer.
I haven't played Hotel Mario, but I've actually
aside from being on the CDI and being designed to be played with a good control.
I mean, a wireless remote that allows you the comfort of playing from anywhere?
I mean, as long as you're within line of sight and you don't have any unusual lighting situations and you don't have any...
If that helps you.
But I mean,
that's not...
Yeah. So, man, I am unfortunately, I've grown to become a weird CDI defender in my older age, just because of how weird and fun that system is. But so here's the trippy thing about the CDI. So, oh my God, Jan Temmer, the CEO of Philips, dictated early on in the production of CDI, any controller we make for this console will work with any game produced for it. So you can play Hotel Mario with the light gun if you want.
Wow.
Like,
yeah,
before mastering Dark Souls on the Guitar Hero controller, there was this.
Yeah. So there's all these fascinating, weird things about the CDI that are out there in that regard. But yeah, just fun stuff like that. So if you play with the 3-button like Genesis style controller, it has these gigantic ergonomic bumps on the bottom. You're like, that's actually kind of comfy. And the D-pad is floaty beyond reason, but comfy.
Yeah, but how many of those exist? That was like
Oh,
the later
God.
model.
Yeah, not enough, I don't think. But yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
lord. I'm still
Sorry, I took this completely off the rails. I apologize.
I'm still trying to find an affordable light gun for my 3DO so I can play American laser games like Mad Dog McCree and stuff like that. And I can't find one under $75, and I just cannot bring myself, no matter how good my old Panasonic True Black 27-inch TV is back here, I just cannot bring myself to spend that kind of money just to play Time Cop. Or
if you wanted on the Philips CDI, the light gun uses basically an IR adapter on it, so that way you have a point of reference like a Wiimote. So you can actually play it on even a modern television if you wanted. So the CDI was forward thinking.
Wow.
I can't say that without laughing. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, name me the best games on the platform.
Thunder in Paradise, right there. That's all. That's all you need to know.
There you go. But yeah, I just couldn't. And it's like, what were those American laser games for 3DO? It was the Mad Dog
Space
McCree's-
Pirate, Mad Dog McCree 1 and 2.
Something Patrol.
The Lethal, the Crime Patrol.
Lethal Enforcer.
I thought it was Space Pirate. I thought.
Didn't they have a variant of Lethal Enforcers from Sega? I thought they.
I think it might have been just Crime Patrol. I think it might have just been similar enough.
Yeah. Crime Patrol. Oh my god.
Yeah. I'll say this: having been in the retro collecting hobby for well over a decade now, like it is not the fun, cheap hobby it used to be.
Wait
like having gone to Portland.
Well, no, I think all the speculators have moved in.
Oh yeah.
I have a multi-port on this big blue Auto 9 looking Nyko light gun that I bought for my PlayStation that might actually work with 3DO. I never even considered trying it. Oh man.
I believe science demands it.
Well, and I also did, just for shits and giggles, plug in a Genesis controller into my 3DO once, and it does actually work. 3DO controllers also work on the Sega Genesis. Imagine that.
Well, that means they're using the DB8 plug adapter.
DB9, but yes.
DB9, there it is.
A Lethal Enforcer controller might work then, or the light gun.
Right?
Maybe. Worth a shot.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I have.
Or maybe even a Sega Menacer. That'd be the way to go.
I have the Lethal Enforcer's gun for the Sega Genesis.
Wasn't that the Justifier?
Yes.
Yeah, the one that was so famously listed in the congressional hearings about video game ratings.
Well, I mean, it does look like Dirty Harry's signature 44 Magnum, so
Oh yeah. I mean, I believe that's on purpose.
Yeah. I mean, the often forgotten third title that was at those the hearings.
Although I do need to point out that Dirty Harry initially carried a 357 Magnum and upgraded to the 44 Magnum in The Enforcer. He was in the original Dirty Harry film when he says, "I may have fired 5 shots or 6 shots. Do you feel lucky, punk?" That was pointing a 357 Magnum at the guy. So, just wanted to dispel an urban myth there that Dirty Harry always carried a 44 Magnum. He did not.
It is important to note these things.
Well, if we're going for historical accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
It's very important.
Yes. Anyway, so I suppose getting back on track here, how do you go about in researching, say the history of the TurboGrafx 16 and why it failed in North America?
Mm-hmm. Stuff like that usually begins with an idea associated with said console, like TurboGrafx being a very fascinating console, having a lot of potential behind it in terms of basically being launched by a company very similar to Sony in terms of their resources and technological capability, and just ultimately falling so dramatically flat. And so for that script, it was I reached out. I didn't really do too much primary research on that one because there was so much secondary information available on that one, and a lot of my research fell off of a blog post about the engine that could, which was an amazing firsthand account that interviewed a lot of people from the industry that set a really good narrative as to why that console failed. So that I would argue that my TurboGrafx video is more an adaptation of that particular list of information and cited sources. So that one was a pretty easy one to produce research wise, just because a lot of that information was readily available in a singular area. But there was other stuff I collected on that one, like the Turbo Express and things like that, like failure. But there are other stuff that was added to it, especially the arcade stuff that came out, where NEC tried to reach into the arcade environment, where they wanted to sell arcade cabinets that were interchangeable, but that ultimately pissed off a lot of arcade manufacturers who refused to release games on the TurboGrafx, ultimately adding to more problems with the TurboGrafx failing in North America. So interesting original sources there as well, but like a lot of that was amalgamations of other sources online. But like I was saying before, there are other stuff where I have an idea and I ultimately go out and just research and interview people to try and get as much information as possible. Like the Atari Genesis video I produced, where it was me discussing Atari getting the Genesis. I reached out to Katz and Steve Lawrence, who were VPs at Atari, so getting firsthand accounts of information based on questions I sent to them. And a lot of that's kind of funny because some of those people won't even talk to folks. And I've leveraged my position in the military by just saying, hey, I'm an officer in the United States Army, but I also do this retro video game historian thing. Would you be interested in talking to me? And I find that's a kind of a funny way to open the door with people.
Wow.
Because ultimately it turns out Mr. Katz was an MP officer back in the late 70s. So he actually was more than willing to talk to me because of we both had Army backgrounds. I thought that was kind of funny.
Interesting.
But
I would
the
argue
most unlikely of things. Like,
I would argue that NEC actually at one point had a bigger foothold than Sony in this particular area of the market, considering the fact that when we're talking about companies like Sony and NEC and Mitsubishi and stuff like that, they're part of the Japanese syndicate system. Which is a very different kind of corporation than the West is used to dealing with, where they have their fingers or their tendrils into literally everything. I mean, Mitsubishi owns cars, banks, video gaming. They were in the movie business, everything. They own 10% of a company called Superior Ready Mix Concrete in San Diego.
Which makes their failure even the more fascinating. Yeah, which makes the failure of NEC even more fascinating.
I mean, they had the PC-88 and the PC-98 computer consoles, which to this day are some of the number one. They dominate the PC market in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It's no problem. It's just, which makes it all the more fascinating as to how they fell so incredibly flat on their face. And it's just one thing after another of them making perpetual mistakes. And a lot of that, you could actually attest that to their ego being a part of what drugged them down and was a part of their failure. It's an amazing story. So the TurboGrafx failure is just, and I think it took me a half hour to tell that story because of everything that was so wrong with NEC.
I would like to point out, though, that technically from the Japanese perspective, the only failures in video gaming for NEC were the SuperGrafx and the PCFX, because the PC Engine and its derivative systems went on for more than a decade.
Oh yeah,
as a mainline system in Japan from 1986 or 87 when it launched in Japan up until they were producing new games for the PC Engine CD-ROM squared system until 1997 officially, and there are other homebrew games that are still being made for the console after that.
Massively supported systems in Japan, right? But it's one of those things where the saving grace for the TurboGrafx was the fact that the PC Engine was outperforming the Famicom in every measure, at least for those first initial couple of years. But then their introduction to the North American market was so delayed with redesigns and other stupid concepts, because ultimately they brought on guys from Atari to sell it, but this was guys from Atari Computers, not Atari Gaming, to sell the TurboGrafx. So these guys had no idea how to sell a game console. They wanted to sell a hi-fi piece of electronics. So they were approaching it from a completely different angle in terms of how what needed to be done to make it successful in North America. And so it's a great story. And I don't know if I don't really want to plug my video, but I think my video does a pretty good job of highlighting a lot of those points and mistakes, at least they made in North America. Because ultimately the Japanese side of the house was pretty effective with Hudson Soft.
Oh, yeah.
Well into the late 90s in terms of their performance.
Hudson and Red.
Yeah.
And that had a bit of a cascade effect because the TurboGrafx barely launched in Europe. Like,
Oh yeah.
very limited launch from what I understand, and it's just a blip at best.
I was talking to a guy from England who has an in-box TurboGrafx that launched.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's all kinds of weird failures that occurred there as well.
So the weird thing to me is that growing up as a kid in like mostly in the 90s, as far as where I can actually remember it, I knew about the NES and I knew about the Genesis. I did not even know that the TurboGrafx was a thing.
See, you had to be a subscriber to Electronic Gaming Monthly in order to get all the massive number of advertisements for the systems.
That or go to the hi-fi electronic stores in the mall. That'd be where you'd see it. Like, 'cause they mismarketed that thing so badly. Like, I grew up in Northern California,
Toys R Us,
which isn't that is not a small market.
Yeah, Toys R Us had one of the first playable kiosks for the
Babbage's had TG16 systems.
Yeah. And I, like, growing up in California, I completely missed it through the late 80s and early 90s. Like, I didn't see them in my part of California. So it was clear that they weren't hitting the market properly, at least in terms of the retail chains that they needed to hit. And that was, a lot of it had to do with their indecisiveness on how they were marketing it initially too. And so there's really so many mistakes, just mistake upon mistake was what buried the console.
I picked up my first Turbo Duo in '94 after it was somewhat unfashionable to
discontinued.
do so. Yeah, but I got mine with like 7 games packed in the box from a company in Los Angeles called BRE Software. And
and then you were like ordering the games through a magazine?
Yeah, I was ordering from a magazine, and I was, because this is '94 and I'm 17, and I'm ordering imports because, god damn it, I want a copy of Macross 2036.
And that's another. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, big Robotech fan, and the thing I did not know growing up, of course, being that the TurboGrafx 16, anything put out by NEC, was the premier anime adaptation system. So if you were a big anime fan, you wanted to have a TurboGrafx.
Man, being an anime fan in '94, that's not that common.
I was buying $30.
It's 2 years before everything good came out. I know there was good stuff before that. I'm joking. It's just that I happen to be a fan of a lot of things that happened in '96.
Dude, I was about to get violent. Being the guy who wrote being the guy who created an entire series that is heavily influenced by Space Battleship Yamato, for Christ's sake.
I only mean that in the sense that content was not easy to come by pre-internet. That's all I mean.
Well, you see, and I do believe I referenced Suncoast Motion Picture Company and Sam Goody Musicland back in the day, and those were the ones you would go to the the little dark corner of that place, and they would have like
buy the VHS tapes,
15 shelves of anime, and it's like what was it? Kagemuri, Orange Road, and Otaku no Video, and Macross 2, and the Robotech Perfect Collection from Streamline, and all of that stuff back in the day. There was no shortage of stuff The question was it good? You know, the entire Star Blazers adaptation of Space Battleship Yamato from Voyager video and all that stuff. All, what was it, 47 volumes of it?
Yeah, I grew up in an absolute desert of media in Northern California. So there was not a lot of options in terms of like of anime. Like I grew into an anime aficionado, I guess, at a later time, thanks to the Independent Film Channel and Sci Friday and Anime Monday
Mm.
that occurred on the Sci-Fi Channel. So that was like 96, 97 was when I finally got like my first taste of anime.
Yeah.
At least that I was aware was Japanese anime.
And yeah, some of the things I was even thinking of are 95 and went into 96, but
Mhm.
you got your
Yeah,
your Gundam Wing, you got your Neon Genesis Evangelion, you got your Slayers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I literally
your,
just put out a review video on MD Geist, one of my favorites.
You got your
Yeah.
Vision of Escaflowne.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I was actually flipped, because I was like a Nintendo bro, you know, for the longest time. I was all about that, and my buddy got a Sega Genesis in '91 or I think it was 90 or 90. Yeah, it was in '91, and we played Shining in the Darkness for the first time. My first experience with Climax.
Oh,
Um, and the art style, and I was like, you know, what's this? This was before I got into high school in '93, and then all of a sudden I was introduced to Akira, and then the rest is history. But I was a Robotech fan in '85 and didn't even remember it, because the only way you could see it was on like Turner Broadcasting, good old TBS. They had Robotech, and then they had G-Force, which was the whole Battle of the Planets / I'm having an ADHD moment where words are
Gatchaman.
Gatchaman. Yes, thank you.
Science Team Gatchaman.
Yeah, what, you know, the entire saga about how that was split into 3 nearly identical but yet somehow completely different series using the same animation. Because I remember watching on TBS when G-Force was released to the West on a limited basis, and thinking that was the bee's knees, and then not understanding that was all from Japan, and then Speed Racer on MTV.
Yeah.
You'd watch Beavis and Butthead, and then you'd follow up with an episode of Speed Racer.
yeah.
I remember that.
Like, that's not Japanese. They're like, oh wait, it is.
Yeah.
I grew up with I don't know. You ever watch a show called Goldwing,
Oh man.
Gold.
which is a South Korean anime?
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
I watched that a ton as a kid.
Don't forget Ulysses 31.
Oh god, that was
That French anime.
man. Yeah, God.
The-
Man, I remember finding that, like, when I was in college, finding that one again and making my girlfriend, now wife, like, listen to the Ulysses thing. And she's like, I hate you so much. Just that intro song.
Oh my lord.
I'm like,
Everybody wanted
Yeah.
to do Jason and the Argonauts in the late 70s is what it was.
Oh yeah.
You know, because that was the original concept for Space Battleship Yamato before Leiji Matsumoto got involved in the project. The studio was like, well, I mean, we kind of like it, but we really like it if you worked with a different character and mecha designer. This whole flying around the universe in an asteroid just doesn't appeal. We want more Japanese nationalism is what we want.
An asteroid doesn't sell toys, goddammit.
Yeah. And Matsumoto, you know, being both an amazing mecha designer and a Japanese nationalist, you know, said, well, what if we put it on the battleship Yamato, you know, the spirit of Nippon, you know?
Oh man.
And they're like, and Japan saves the world. Tell me more.
I worked in a video store in the early 2000s, and I'm trying to remember what anime it was, but it was like a knockoff Yamato thing where they were battling the aliens inside the Earth. And the thing I thought was hilarious about it was they were rebuilding the Yamato battleship to fight the aliens inside the Earth. But then the Americans were also brought out the Ohio battleship, or the Iowa class battleships to fight the Yamato again.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, God, this is the most Japanese nationalistic thing, and it's just amazing.
I mean, it's like it's in your face, but it's subtle too. You know, it's like how can
I'm
that
like,
be?
all right.
Yeah, it was just we have this multinational force, but everybody has Japanese names. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The Star Force. The Star Force will reunite, and you know, Zordark and all that stuff, and Dessler, that bastard. The blue guy. We'll make our enemy blue, so that way it won't offend anybody.
Oh man, good times. Sorry, I'm completely taking us off the rails, Adam. I apologize.
It happens on this program so very often.
I think we covered a lot of great territory, personally.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so getting back on track as much as we possibly can. What are you planning to do in the near future in terms of projects?
So right now, I'm working on a history of the PlayStation 1. I dug up an old book called Revolutionaries at Sony, which was actually published back in 2000, which has some really great first-hand interviews with Ken Kutaragi about the development, and also some just fun stuff about the degenerating Philips-Sony relationship that led to the Nintendo deal falling through. So I've been kind of basically going through that book and rewriting that script, so that'll be another 30-minute history video about the PlayStation, which will be pretty fun.
Does it have the part where Sega almost had a working relationship with Sony?
I actually already did a video on that, believe it or not.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
Like, it's
sorry.
It's one of those. Once again, it's one of those dark corner footnotes of history that makes for an interesting what if, but isn't ultimately explored too much because it didn't happen. You know.
Oh yeah.
It's like with
what I thought.
Atari and the NES and the Nintendo Entertainment System, for example. You know, it makes for a better what if scenario than an actual historical document.
Oh yeah, for sure. With the Sony Sega deal, it's pretty interesting because you have in the console wars, you have a pretty fun first-hand account from Tom Kalinske about that, and then later in 2021. Some information actually dropped where some Sony execs on the Japanese side actually decided to talk about that deal, and it was pretty funny because I had a guy that was like commenting on my video about how inaccurate I was because I didn't factor in this information that came out 2 years after I posted my video. But what I thought was kind of funny is I went through and then read the Japanese information and had it translated by a buddy. And they were pretty much saying the exact same things that Tom Kalinske was saying in terms of Sega and Sony not having a compatible work culture in terms of how they ran things. And that was just because Sega wasn't as old of a corporation in terms of their work culture, in terms of their financial stability. And Sony was like, I don't know about that. We're not sure we want to absorb, cowboys like that in that regard.
I'm like, yeah, a lot more has come out about Sega in the 90s and just how volatile they were. I'm like,
oh yeah, 95 leak, yeah.
I think the president of Sega of Japan, like some high-ranking Japanese executive, opened up about those times and how apparently Sega of America was a bigger drain than people thought because of the inventory situation, even though that's a situation that was created by the retailer more than anything else.
There's some really interesting stuff that dropped. It was kind of funny while I was deployed. I think it's a 54-page PDF that dropped about the financials of Sega in 1996. That has emails from Tom Kalinske, a variety of other people involved in like Sega at that point in time, talking about their dire straits and their situation and retailers returning product. So there's a lot of really cool information that dropped about that whole situation. Because I don't know if you've read the Console Wars, but a lot of that book is very much from Tom Kalinske's perspective. So he's very much like the main character of that story. So he's very much in control of that historical narrative of how Sega was running. So this is it's really fun.
contravening opinions on Console Wars,
Mhm.
the book.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we have to
Yep.
mention that because we know Console Wars, the YouTube channel. Like,
Oh yeah. Console Wars, the book written by Blake Harris. Sorry, but a lot of interesting information out there for it.
no doubt, no doubt. Like Sega in the '90s is a fascinating subject, if nothing else. Like the Dreamcast days, but
Mhm.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so your next major project is the history of the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, so going into depth with that and Blender renders and the like, yeah.
And from what I gleaned from your where you've been video, you also plan on doing like non video game stuff as well.
Yeah, on my channel, I've done. I always enjoy doing remake and original film content comparisons. Just going down the line and talking about movies as to why a remake might be awful versus the original, or why the remake might be bad. So I'll do modern media content reviews like that as well. So I've never, even though my channel would probably be more successful if I actually stuck to a singular niche and just exploited that. I've always been very much a sporadic person in terms of making the content I want to make when I do. So if I have a tingling about like wanting to talk about the movie Red Dawn, for example, I will sit down and analyze the remake and the original and tell you exactly why one is better than the other. So I kind of have a facet for doing things like that.
Understandable. And there's no shortage of, let's face it, remakes, reboots, and everything. Not
Yeah, there
just
never
in
will be.
movies, but video games. Yeah. I mean, that's an idea you could probably extend to the video gaming world. Like, see
Yeah,
how the, this year version of Resident Evil 4 stacks up against the original, for example.
yeah.
Things of
I
that
do
nature.
like. I do love how the design by committee remake, what we've already done, has begun to befall the video game industry the same way it's befallen the movie industry in terms of similar stories and concepts being dusted off and rehashed for a new generation. So I do love that they mirror each other in that regard.
I suppose, but it's more imperative in the video game industry. Because the video game industry is so much more tech heavy and technology dependent than the movie industry. Like, there are different formats and everything like that, but the video game industry switches those like every 5 or so years.
Oh yeah, and you could probably argue that the risk within the video game industry is increasingly more and more based on the production time needed to make a game and the budgets that are incredibly massive, to where they've literally had to develop entire new sales models for how the game is sold based on DLC, like purchasable DLC, in order to like propagate sales for the game at a later time to continue to cover the development costs. So it's kind of fascinating how it's going that way.
It's come up, and there, the failure of just like even a single game these days can be absolutely devastating to a studio.
Oh yeah.
I can cite some examples, but
Oh yeah, like
It's been a
industry
rough
mainstay
year.
like Ravensoft. Yeah, like they had Singularity that did bad, and then they ended up getting absorbed into greater EA and just Activision, and making freaking Call of Duty titles, right? Like stuff like that.
Arguably, that was a promotion because they were working on their own. It's like creatively it's unfamiliar, but Raven's one of the lead developers on their premier franchise.
Yeah, there is that, I guess.
It was kind of like vicarious visions, going from Tony Hawk to Diablo. I get why people were pissed off at that, but just what in terms of what they're working on, one was more important and more prestigious than the other. It's not a judgment call; it's just what is in terms of popularity and sales numbers and all that stuff. But yeah,
But yeah, it's certainly a fascinating change in the industry from when it started and was like two guys in a garage studio making Spider-Man versus the Kingpin, you know?
I mean, that hasn't gone away. If anything, it's come back.
Hmm.
Like, because that's the indie scene right there. You know, we have people on my personal program, Fragments of Silicon, all the time who are that person, those people. So thankfully, that particular spirit is still alive, though it's definitely beset with longer development times than you got in the 80s. Like, no matter how you look at it, it still takes quite a while to make a game in this day and age. Like, even an indie title can run up to 2 to 3 years. Like, you know, we have the stories to prove this. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, so are you still dealing with the, let's say, work-life balance issues?
Oh, that's with me in the military. That's never not a problem. So yeah, so my work life relationship with my work life balance has always been pretty fascinating because it's kind of funny. My wife is. I don't know if any of you have a background in the military, but it's always really funny with my wife in terms of like we'll go to things and the commanding officer up there, the general, will say like, yeah, the military is a very family oriented organization, and my wife is always like rolling her eyes because I'm always going off and doing stuff. But no, it's one of those things like I enjoy my career in the military, but I also enjoy my passion and hobby for making content as well. So it's always been a difficult life work balance for me in terms of making content. So I've never had the luxury of being able to produce a video as often as I would like, just because of the amount of I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist, but the amount of ideas I have for what I want to execute in the video oftentimes outpace the amount of time I have to execute it.
That's understandable. I'm like, and such is the way of life, let's say.
Mhm.
Like, but you know, it's we also know it's not an easy road to have this be your career as well.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, it's not a bad thing to just have it as a hobby or a side thing either.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. For me on YouTube, it's been kind of funny because like my job in the military, I do a lot of things. I started my career as a chemical weapons officer, and then I moved over to telecommunications signal, and then what's kind of funny is since I'm full time with the Idaho Army National Guard, so I'm in Idaho full time. But then I manage a number of programs within the Idaho National Guard, and one of them is visual information. So I do multimedia content creation for the military as well. So it's kind of funny how like my background with YouTube and stuff like that has helped me within my Army career, ironically, because I know video production and things like that from the outside. So it's funny how those things have somehow met.
Life is strange.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, we should probably wrap up the conversation here, given the time.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's been going on way too long.
I don't know. I was having fun. I was just sitting there enjoying listening to the last part of it there.
Yeah, I got time if you guys want to keep talking. That's not a problem for me.
Well, we're gonna do entertainment news, and then I need to take a nap. I do normally do
All right.
I do normally do another show on my VTubing channel from 11 to 1 a.m. On Wednesday nights, but I've decided I'm not going to do it tonight since we started 45 minutes late on on this show. So I'm just going to skip right to the rest and then go to work at my regular job. So I know a lot of my fans are mad at me because I've been putting this Mary Skelter Nightmares playthrough on hold for quite some time now. But we're going to do entertainment news, and you're welcome to stick around for that. I think that's the best.
Yeah, I'll hang out.
Any appearances? Anything you're going to be doing before we move segments here? Any appearances that you'd like to promote, or things that are coming down the pike that you want to talk about immediately?
Yeah, something I'll be doing this Saturday, being Veterans Day. I do a live stream. I have in the past. Essentially, it's a charity live stream where you donate money, and I'll do like a push-up for like one push-up equals $1, things like that. and I'll be doing that again on Saturday. In the past, I've raised over $500 for Wounded Warrior, and so that'll be happening again. So if you want to drop by, you're more than welcome. It's on the Historic Nerd YouTube channel.
Oh, phenomenal, and that's a very worthy cause too. My dad would be very happy to hear that. He's an Army veteran as well. So
Nice.
all right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
As I said, you're welcome to stick around and hang with us while we talk about general entertainment news. I guarantee that the strike is going to come up at least once and something else. So,
Well, about that.
I'll keep sipping whiskey and listening. I'll enjoy that.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. So, Adam, Kevin, let's get this underway.
Well, yeah. Well,
Let's
about
just
the
go ahead and
strike,
say it.
Yeah.
The strike is over.
Oh,
Yes,
Yeah.
the SAG-AFTRA tonight approved the tentative agreement with AMPTP, which will last for 3 years. It is expected to be put up with the national board tomorrow, and then after that, we'll get more of a full detail about the deal, and then it'll go to the rank and file, who should approve it immediately. But as of either 12:08 Eastern, 12:08 Pacific, the strike is officially over after 100 and I think it's how many days? 110 something days.
Yep.
I think it's like 120 at this point.
Yeah.
It was 114 last week. I remember that they were talking about. They were like, "Well, it's not the 146 days of the WGA strike, but we're getting up there." I was like,
100 and 100, 118, 118, 118 days.
It struck me, and I believe I made this observation before, that they were so proud of making that deal with the WGA and then persisted in fucking around and finding out with the SAG. And that's what was what was so weird to me, was that they were like, all right, the writers are back to work. And it's like, yeah, but that's going to be a short-lived thing, because then they're not going to have any actors to perform their scripts if this goes on much longer.
We all thought that after the writers' deal went done, that the deal with the actors would be a lot more straightforward and a lot streamlined. Instead, the AMPTP decided to fuck around a little bit with the actors, and the actors went, no. And it lasted probably an extra couple weeks, month and a half longer than it should have. So,
very strange time to make an agreement with the WGA and then play fuck around and find out with the actors. But the actors did have some more significant demands. I will point that out.
Yeah. Yep, they did. They did, but at the same time, they still had the same mindset of, we could break them, we could push them, so on and so forth. And it probably extended things for a good bit longer. And I think when it comes to the AI question, that was looking like it could have easily brought everything down, but it looks like there was enough pressure from everybody involved to go, yeah, no, we're not doing this. We're going to end this here.
Nobody liked the AI thing.
No, well, the studios did, but the actors didn't, and that's the point.
Yep. And indeed, they have gotten the AI protections that they sought.
Yep. Although at first it was a case of SAG wanting to continue to fuck with them on that, and they decided to go, no, here's a counter, get rid of it, please. And the studios decided not to press the issue. Which, thank God, because they could have easily done so, and it felt like they were going to.
Well, in addition to that, the first ever protections for actors against artificial intelligence, and there's also been a historic pay increase, which is going to...
you cannot buy perpetual rights to use my image and voice without my permission, for ridiculously small amounts of money.
Yeah. I mean, turns out that that wasn't really negotiable. But putting that aside, the minimum scale, they call it, will increase by 7%, 2% above the increases received by the Writers Guild of America and the Directors Guild of America, because there's still a pecking order in Hollywood.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Also, the DGA kind of folded their hand quickly.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but-
the thing about that is that, the studios and networks probably thought when the DGA folded that the writers and the actors would fold, and no.
They were wrong.
They were wrong.
Anyway, the deal also includes streaming participating bonus,
Just a
as well
first.
as increases in pension and health contributions. The union has said the contract is worth more than $1 billion in total.
Yeah, which it definitely was bigger than the initial proposals from the studios and networks. So
yeah, so it
they
turns
did
out-
indeed move to the actors' way, which is the goal of stuff like this.
shock upon shocks, the massive profitable corporations had enough money to pay for this. They just didn't wanna.
They didn't wanna, and they were forced to because the actors were like, we're not getting off this unless you do.
It's also they were dealing with some very strong unions.
Yes.
You know,
In a united front, I might add.
yeah, solidarity.
Yes.
But yeah, it's like it's not just enough to have a union. Like they need
Right.
to actually be effective.
Yes.
Like,
effective, strong, united.
Yeah.
I should also note that very specifically because there has been a history of division and infighting. That was not the case at all during the course of this year, which is vitally important.
If you want a good example of how division can sink labor negotiations, go watch the American Gladiators documentary on Netflix.
Oh yes. Oh
Not
yes.
even joking about that.
Oh yes.
Because that's exactly what happens with the American Gladiators. Some of them were threatening to quit over it. They wanted a better deal, but not everyone was on the same page for various reasons, and the whole thing got tanked. That's short version. Anyway, but yeah, so this is the end of the Hollywood strikes. It's
for this year.
Until we find out what's going to happen with IATSE next year.
Right. We have IATSE, we have the Animation Guild as well, which has their own separate agreement that's also up next year, and the teams and the local branch of the Teamsters Union, local 399, they're also up next August. So everything. So this year's labor strife is over, but there's more down the pike, and we'll see if they want to avoid that because.
Also, worth reiterating that SAG-AFTRA is going to move on to the video game industry.
Right, that too as well. Yeah, the interactive the agreement, which is with each individual company and not a collective. So keep your eyes out for what happens at each individual company. There might be some companies that do a deal and some companies that go on strike. We'll have to see.
Yeah. So, but for the moment, the labor disputes are done in this sector.
Yep, and the productions are going to start back up, and the 2024 calendar is saved.
Yeah, it's probably not enough to save the Marvels, but what can you do?
Yeah, although, it wasn't really going to... I mean, PR probably wasn't going to do anything either, but there might be day of media now, maybe.
I'm like, they couldn't hype up this film because of all the strikes.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's too late, but I mean, really, maybe hype probably wouldn't have saved it anyway, but it didn't help.
Anyway, moving on to, I'm sure what we actually want to talk about this week. That's the Legend of Zelda movie.
Oh, baby.
Hey.
Yeah. Good luck. Oh boy.
It was announced on Monday, I believe. Monday night.
I think it was Tuesday night.
Yeah. point is, not too long ago, Nintendo posted onto Twitter X that they are officially working on a Legend of Zelda movie.
A live action Zelda movie. We should be very specific.
Yeah, dodged a
Yeah.
bullet there because whatever else, Illumination isn't going to taint this with their fucking mediocrity. Like, yeah,
Yeah, we dodged one bullet, but
I'm getting to it.
yeah.
Like,
Anyway,
but yeah, it's like, so attached to this movie is for reasons that are kind of beyond me, but according to Nintendo, it's because he's produced a lot of hit films, and that's Avi Arad.
Avi Arad.
And I guess that is true.
Yeah.
But the thing is, okay, Avi Arad is very hit and miss. Like,
Yes, he's produced the Spider-Man films, including the Spider-Verse films, either as a producer or an EP. He executive produced the original X-Men trilogy, basically.
Yep.
But he has also done Ghost Rider and the mid-2000s Fantastic Four movies, and probably more closer to the kind of audience this film will probably create, Ghost in the Shell 17, a.k.a. Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. He's also the producer of Morbius.
Yes, Morbius as well, yes.
Um,
And the Venom films, sort of which is coming next this about one full year from now, by the way.
The bag is mixed. We get it.
Yes, but the point is the bag is mixed.
Yeah.
Well, you can't be all killer and no filler, you know.
Yeah.
It's a gamble.
Attached to direct is Wes Bell, which is probably not a name that jumps out at you. He is known as the director behind the Maze Runner films. But probably, yeah.
And also the upcoming fourth Planet of the Apes movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So there's that as well.
Yeah.
They're still making those?
Yeah, this is going to be this is going to be basically after the long after the events of war. So Caesar's not involved here.
Yeah. Like, so kind of seen as a mediocre pick right now, but that's mainly because everyone's saying bringing up the Maze Runner trilogy. Because the Maze Runner movies weren't amazing, like, but I guess they have their fans.
I mean,
to some extent, we know that Nintendo is going to be executing at least their usual amount of
more.
Don't let this suck too much.
Well, here's the counter. Here's the countermeasure. Nintendo is deeply involved in this one, like more so than say the Super Mario Brothers movie, where they probably had the overall approval, but they pretty much let Illumination be Illumination, which is why that film was so safe and sterile.
Should we also note the actual writer of this film as well? That's also been attached.
Probably.
Because it's also a bit of a gamble. The man attached to pen the screenplay for this film is a gentleman by the name of Derek Connolly. Now, if you don't know who this is, he is the co-writer of the Jurassic World series, the co-writer of Kong Skull Island, the co-writer of Detective Pikachu, and the co-writer of The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
That's a lot of co's in your writing there.
Yes, but more specifically, they're all the co-writers of a lot of things, and he wrote the screen. The only sole screenplay he wrote is a movie that I don't think anybody's ever heard of called Monster Trucks.
Was he actually?
I
Was he
remember.
actually credited on Rise of Skywalker? Because I remember that the big names shown in the credits were only being J.J.
Yes,
Abrams
he
and
was.
Chris
Yes,
Terrio.
yes, he was. He co-wrote the story with Colin Trevorrow, J.J. Abrams, and Chris Terrio.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, yeah, Monster
He
Truck,
retained. He retained
that was its
story
own,
credit.
Like, but the thing is, Nintendo is not just overseeing some; they're co-financing it. Apparently, over 50% of the financial backing for this movie is coming from Nintendo themselves. That's a change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boy, man,
So
I'll tell you, this is a gamble. This is arguably going to be a bigger gamble than the Mario movie was.
well, yeah, I would
Like,
say so
not just
because
that's yeah, and especially now that this is going to be half financed by them.
Yeah,
So
because
this bombs.
frankly, a fun kids movie is acceptable for Mario. Mario is not particularly like story or thematically heavy, whereas Zelda is.
it's also Illumination when they are on, they can be decent, inoffensive.
Yes. Get the job done.
Yeah, but here's the thing: nobody lauds Illumination like they do, say, Pixar, or even like Disney feature animation. They're just not that studio. They're seen as a solid hand at best and an obnoxious minion factory at worst. So they don't have the ambition for a Legend of Zelda type. I'll say it right here and now.
Yes. Yes.
If that sounds insulting, well, I've seen a lot of Illumination films. It's like, yeah, sorry. You are not the guys to handle that in animation.
No.
They don't do legends that are like significantly heroic narratives.
Yeah,
they don't. They're not the kind of people to give a dramatic film of any kind.
Yeah, they are just not known for that style. But I suppose that is moot at this point because we're getting a live action Legend of Zelda, and we know that can work theoretically because we've seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, we've seen the Harry Potter movies, to a lesser extent the Narnia pictures. Point is, it can be made to work. Like, now, as far as an adaptation, we have no details on that because, when we're talking about the Legend of Zelda, we've got.
Is it going to be an adaptation of a specific story that's already been told? Is it going to be a new one, which is definitely possible?
Yeah. One thing I don't think Nintendo can avoid is Link is going to have to talk. Like
having a complete. I mean, in the games, Link is heavily implied to talk all the time.
Right, but they're going to have to actually put a voice to the mouth because guess what?
Yeah.
You don't have your leads acting silently in a movie.
You can't have them be quiet and not talk all the time.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm like, there's gonna have to be some speechifying here. There's no way around it.
Yeah, and that's gonna be a gamble. because
I don't think it is. I
think it is because
No,
Link is
I
not
think it would-
necessarily since 1998.
People have been making a huge fucking fuss about Link's hair color and which hand he uses, and you're sitting here saying there's no chance that he's gonna be criticized for having an actual voice.
I mean,
but no, it's a bigger gamble to not have a voice
Right,
because
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anybody who's arguing that it's probably not a big deal if he talks. It is a big fucking deal.
Yes.
People were mad that in the remakes of Link to the Past that his hair wasn't pink anymore.
right, and lest we forget the whole Chris Pratt affair about Mario's voice.
yeah. It's like what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that it's a gamble simply because of who's going to be him, and how does he voice him. That's the gamble. That's the gamble.
They lucked out. They lucked out that Chris Pratt did not tank the Super Mario movie.
I'm like,
Yeah.
Here's something that hasn't really come up, and I'm surprised it hasn't come up. Which version of Link do you use? I'm not
That's
talking about.
that's true.
Well, that's
yeah.
kind of what I meant with about the version of the story thing.
No,
Yes.
not version of the story, version of the character. Do you use Kid Link or do you use Young Adult Link, or both?
Older Link. He's been.
I would say it's whatever version that this particular point in the timeline or parallel reality version that this story takes place in, because it's not going to be a retelling of one of the existing Zelda games.
Yeah, that's a story-based decision, and he's really only been a kid in a few games, and in at least one of those, it wasn't for the whole game.
Yeah,
if I were to be a betting person,
for example,
if I were to be a betting person, I would probably suggest they probably do them all with, probably some with Kid Link, but not too much, but probably the majority of it, probably young adult, teen. They'll probably go teen, young adult, because, they probably want to get that hit. I mean, considering you got the director for the Maze Runner films, I would probably assume that it would be young adult Link, just based on that alone.
Now, if I had to pick which Zelda game that they might adapt for the big screen and not, as opposed to like an original setting, a looser adaptation, if you will, like they do with the games. But I would say probably the Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, probably.
Breath of the Wild or Ocarina of Time are probably the most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose, but I think considering the fact that literally every Legend of Zelda game starts out with somehow Ganon returned.
Only most of them.
Yeah, literally all of them. There is Ganon in every Legend of Zelda game that is.
There are at least 3 games with absolutely no Ganon.
Well, there is the Vati. There is the Vati trilogy, but.
And Majora's Mask.
That's true, but
are you sure they're not going to push for a Cyberpunk adaptation?
Look, everybody wants that. It would be freaking sweet, but they're not going to.
You're missing the point that I'm driving at here. The point is that with an infinite timeline and an infinite number of resurrections for the spirits of the 3 main characters in this, that they could literally make an original story, quote unquote, original story in the timeline of Legend of Zelda, and it would be the same.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So
right.
That's why I'm saying I hope to God that this is an independent storyline that takes place at a different point along the timeline, or one of the 3 main branching timelines.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose what I should have said, because I agree with that, is that I suspect it's going to rhyme a lot with Ocarina. Although they could want to do like an origin story with Ganon, and there's only a couple of those.
I would hope not. I don't want anything to do with Ocarina of Time. I think it's overplayed. I didn't
say anything about hope.
I'm saying that what they should do is they should make a Zelda-like story similar to the vague premise of the original game, and not revisit any of the other existing storylines, like trying to add to it or adapt it. I think they should just take the characters and what we know about them and write a generic fantasy story that follows the same beats as the most classic games in the series. Now, I know Ocarina of Time is among those, but I'm talking more generically like Zelda 1, Zelda 3, A Link Between Worlds and stuff like that, which does follow the kind of dark timeline that, you know, leads us to Majora's Mask and Wind Waker and all that stuff. But I don't want to repeat any of those stories. I want Link, I want Zelda, I want Ganon, Kingdom of Hyrule. Maybe it's secondary and tertiary kingdoms are explored somewhat. Maybe we get a little origin of the character of Link himself, because they did talk about alternate kingdoms and all that, and then leave it at that. It doesn't have to be Skyward Sword. It doesn't have to be Breath of the Wild. It doesn't have to be Tears of the Kingdom. It doesn't have to be Link to the Past or whatever. That's
Oracle of Seasons.
Oracle Seasons, or any of the Oracle game, or Link's Awakening, where it was all a dream. Fuck you, Nintendo.
Like, anyway, so we don't have any of those details right now. Like, and it's probably going to be a few years before we get that, because they just announced this.
Yeah.
Hell, we don't have any casting for you know, at least Link and Zelda. Presumably Ganondorf Ganon is going to be there. Once again, we don't know if they're going to use Ganondorf or Ganon. And yes, those are two distinct incarnations.
Yes.
I'm like, so more on that as it develops.
I mean, it's all the spirit of demise. You know, I mean, that's what it is. You know, it's the three goddesses versus demise is what it ultimately boils down to.
Anyway,
which is funny because those have barely been in the same game.
We should probably wrap this up here.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So let's see. Next week we have Leslie Engel of TFX Studios, and I did read the blurb last time. Adam, did you want to cover any details about this outside of what it says here in the blurb?
Not really, not right now.
All right.
Like,
Leslie works with Warner Brothers re-recording mixer for Netflix series One Piece. Worked with interactive music Signal, Heavy Distance, and is a lyricist and a voice actor, I'm guessing, as well, or no?
I'm not sure. Like, I haven't looked that deeply. You know, hint, research happens during the week. You know, a guest is
right.
So
we have a multi-talented artist. We have a multi-talented recording artist appearing on the podcast next week, and we will have more details as they become available. So we're definitely looking forward to that. And November 22nd is the Thanksgiving holiday, so we will not actually be having a show after that until November 29th. And of course, I will remind everybody next week. As I am so fond of saying, normally there would be a Waifu Wednesday episode of Up Late with Mace tonight. That will not be happening tonight because it is too late and I'm too tired and I do need to work after that. So I'm going to take a little nap and then do all that. But a huge thank you to our guest, Ian Thorpe of Historic Nerd, for coming on the program and entertaining us, regaling us with your stories. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
All right, and we'll see you all next week for another installment of Moonhawk Studios Presents. Until then, I am your host, Mac Paladin. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, kids.